Welcome. My name is Sue, and I am the office manager with Christian Adoption Services. And I'm so glad for you to be here with us today to learn a little bit about out-of-state adoptions, what that even means, and how to maybe start to navigate that or think about that. Um, Today, we're going to be going over pretty much the definition of what is an out-of-state adoption, or what do we mean when we say that, and what states that we work with, the process overview. There'll be times for questions sprinkled throughout, as well as at the end there'll be questions. So please feel free, if you have a question, to go ahead and type it in the chat, and then we'll make sure that we address that question. Also, we are going to, let's see, I was going to say we're scheduled to go until 1 o'clock. If we're done a little bit before that, we can stay on if people have more questions, or you can just pop off when you need to. That's fine as well. And we're going to have presentations from Katie, our new Christian Adoption Services social worker, and we'll also have Tina, who I think all of you or most of you are familiar with. Tina, she'll also be here presenting. And then we have a couple of adoptive parents who will be sharing their story with out-of-state adoptions and what their experience has been. So that is what we have planned for today. And so now I'm going to turn it over to, it says Tina Block, but it is Katie Wusso. She started on Monday, and so she is going to be sharing. I think you are muted, so if you want to unmute yourself, and I'll mute me, and we'll turn it over to you. There you are.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? So like Sue said, my name is Katie Wusso, and I have recently accepted a position here at Christian Adoption Services as of Monday. So my role will be working alongside of Tina and helping with some out-of-state adoptions. I may look like a familiar face to some of you, as I was the intern last January while I was working on my Bachelor's of Social Work degree through Minnesota State University Moorhead. So I'm just going to get us kicked off here, starting to introduce out-of-state adoption, and Tina will pop in here as well. And like Sue said, feel free to leave any questions in the chat. We would love to answer those for you guys. So we're going to be talking about out-of-state adoption today. Some terms that you might hear referred to of out-of-state adoption is greater U.S. adoption, out-of-state adoption, and then interstate adoption. We're typically using the terminology out-of-state adoption, so that's what you'll hear from us. So the just broad definition of what out-of-state adoption is when a child is born in one state and they will be adopted to a parent living in another state. Both states must give approval through what is called ICPC. That stands for Interstate Compact of the Placement of Children, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So some of the states that we specifically work with: California, Texas, Florida, Arizona, and Georgia. And for those of you number people, this is based on the Children's Bureau of Public Child Welfare Agency statistics. And the number one placing in 2014 in California was 5,471. The next state was Texas with 5,221. And then we look into Florida as well with 3,267. So that gives you an idea of how many more placements are in these states just due to population and the increase of adoptions that we're seeing in these states. Next, I want to walk you through the process of what this looks like. So you would complete your application and home study through Christian Adoption Services. So we would help you write your home study, and based on our criteria and requirements, once you are home study approved, you would complete an application with one of the out-of-state agencies or consulting agencies. In that, for that purpose, then you would join their waiting list, and each agency will talk about that more, as well as to what agencies have different requirements. Their process is a little bit different. This is situation-based of birth parents, so you are your book is shown to a birth mom based on you agreeing to the situation. You would be given the option. Then you would work with matching up with a birth parent. So that might include traveling to the state to meet with the birth parents during the last trimester of their pregnancy. Due to COVID, we know that that might look a little bit different. Might be virtual visit or a phone visit. And then next we'll talk about hospital time. You would travel to the state that the child was being born in for the hospital time, and then you would stay in that state until the termination of parental rights, or the ICPC, the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children, what we talked about before in the definition, is complete. That typically takes around 2 to 3 weeks. And then once that placement in finalization, when you return back to your home state, we would help you with that process here with Christian Adoption Services. And then a finalization hearing would be held in your home's county's courthouse. The finalization laws are based on your residency. So we are licensed in Minnesota and North Dakota, and some of you represent both sides of the state. That looks a little different for each state. The attorney is needed in North Dakota, and that placement is 6 months. And then Minnesota is a little bit shorter. That is 3 months, and then no attorney is needed for that process. Do we have our speaker?
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So, it says, when you say, okay, question in the chat, it says, when you say the list of states you work with, if we identify an adoption with a child in a different state through our outreach, you will still help with it, right? I can't see the rest of the bottom of the question for some reason.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Adam. I'm gonna let Tina answer that question, as I am not 100% sure, and I don't want to lead you with false information, but thank you for that question. We will hold that one, and when Tina is available to join us, we will make sure that she can answer that and give you the answers to that question for you. Do you want Casey to talk?
So are you done with your part there, Katie?
Is she with us the whole time? Does she need to leave for some reason?
So Casey, our normal schedule was you're going to be here till 11:30. So did you want to hop in with your story now, or do you want to wait until the presentation is done? We'll turn that up.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, sorry, Casey, you didn't catch that.
Oh, I just asked if you could hear me.
Yes, now we can.
Okay. If I was hearing a little bit of echoing, if anybody else is having echoing, maybe just commented or muted or something.
Sure.
Okay. You can hear me okay, everyone?
Yes.
I am so bad with like just presentations. Just write something in the chat so it doesn't feel like I'm talking only to my computer, okay? If you guys, I mean, it doesn't matter. I can chat, visit a little bit now or finish the presentation. Either one is fine.
Okay. I'll just keep going so that they understand the process, and then maybe your personal story later will make more sense.
Okay.
Okay, so these are just some pros and cons that we wanted to report on based on what we've seen working with families, as well as things that families have reported to us. So some of the pros would be a shorter wait time due to the higher population of these states, obviously bigger than Minnesota and North Dakota. The placement time is anywhere from 6 to 9 months, as well as more diversity in race of children. And also, if travel is something that you enjoy as well, you would have the opportunity to travel to the state of the birth mom and where the child would be born. So that might be a perk for some of you. And then some cons that we like to point out to you guys as well, just to be upfront with you, is the cost of the agency fees is significantly higher. I will be talking about some more specific agencies that we work with and give you a breakdown of those prices as well. And then just the risk increase of failed adoptions. Like I said earlier, this is situation based. You might be given a situation of a birth mom and that opportunity might not follow through, as well as here at CAS, we try to get in touch with you when the birth mom is in about their last trimester and they are pretty confident in their decision of choosing adoption. Also, there would be an increase in expenses, might having to drive to the state, to fly to the state, a hotel or an Airbnb while you are staying in the area as well. And then just a note that we would advise that you keep your receipts for those different expenses for the purpose of the adoption tax credit. Another con that we'd like to point out is less agency support in these situations. The agency that you might be working with would be supporting the birth mom, and they might not have a worker to support you directly as the adoptive family, versus working with Christian Adoption Services. There would be a worker assigned to working with the birth parent, and then also a worker assigned to working with the adoptive family as well. This just comes with more unknowns in the process as well. You aren't right there in the same state as the birth parent as well, so that might cause some extra anxiety. And then also the need to stay away from home or work for a longer period of time during that termination, which is estimated about 2 to 3 weeks. You would need to stay in the home state of where the child was born. So we have seen different cases where maybe one of the parents had to return to the home state that you are living in as the adoptive family, or now with COVID, one of the perks working virtually, maybe bringing your work along with to that state. So that would be different. Does anyone have any questions so far on the pros and cons, or anything they want to point out before we head into our next part? Looks like I just see screens, so we will move on. If you have anything, Sue is here watching our chat as well. So next, I wanted to touch on some of the agencies that we personally have experience working with, and then the difference between what an agency is and then also what a consulting service would be. So one of the agencies I wanted to point out is Adoption Choices of Arizona. That is in Phoenix, Arizona. Their wait list is a little bit smaller. They keep it to 15 active families. And then they also have a waiting list to get on to the waiting list as well. So their average wait time to be matched is about 6 to 12 months. And then they did say that if you were open to different diversity, that wait time would be a little bit faster. On average, they conduct 25 to 30 placements each year. And then the process for joining their waitlist would be completing an application and a checklist, and then they do have a 1-hour orientation over the phone. Cost-wise, with this agency for the registration is $595, and then total fees after an approved home study would be anywhere from $45,000 to $50,000. And all of this information that I'm giving you is up to date and current, as I just spoke with these adoptive agencies yesterday. So these numbers and prices should be pretty current. Another agency that we've worked with and I was also able to speak with is Building Arizona Families. That is also out of Phoenix, Arizona. This is a larger agency, and their wait list holds 110 families. They had a pretty good conversation with their representative, Robin, yesterday. Their wait time, they've seen up to 1 year as the longest, and she's also said that they've had immediate matchings as well. So all based on God's timing. And she did say that the shorter wait time is also included for families that are open to any race, and also exposure to substance or mental health would also include a shorter wait time as well. Their average placement for the past 3 years has been 70 placements, and their current placement rate right now is at 70%. And the process for joining their wait list, they have a representative that would email you a packet including a checklist, and their fees are broken into a couple parts. The registration and application would be $500, and then the overall home study itself is $39,000. $22,000 of that amount is due at the time of match, and then $17,000 is due at the time of placement. She did share with me as well that their business is running as normal due to COVID, so that has not slowed them down at all. So that was good to hear as well. And another agency that I wanted to point out as well is called Open Door Agency. That is out of Thomasville, Georgia, and they are being affected by COVID. So right now they are not having a current wait list. They weren't able to answer questions regarding how long a wait list or how many placements they would have each year. But they did encourage, if families were interested in checking into this option, to check back in January. They're hoping that they would have more of an opening in January. So case by case, agency by agency, and all about just doing research. Another agency in Florida is the Law Office of Kimberly Gossett. Tina has had some experience working with them before. I was unable to reach any of their representatives, so I don't have information on them, but that's also a name that we wanted to point out as well. And then something that is different is a consulting agency. So what the consulting agency does is helps you be active on other lists and connecting with other agencies. So one of the places that we work with is Christian Adoption Consultants, and that is out of Georgia. So you are not specifically on one waitlist, you would be on multiple different waitlists. This agency just ensures that they're providing ethical services, which is important, and then they would help you make a personalized list of agencies that you might be interested based on your budget or your preferences. And just a reminder that they are not a child placing agency. So their wait time is anywhere from 6 to 10 months, and they do on average of 200 placements each year. So their fees look a little bit different. You would pay for 14 months of services, which would be $3,980. And then the overall process of match and placement looks about 38,000 to 40,000. Also, another unique service that they also offer is help with assisting in making your profile books as well. So that would be an interesting service as well to check out. And then another consulting services is called Faithful Adoption Consultants. So I know that was a lot of information so far. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out on those. Looks like we're doing good.
Trying to answer that since Tina's here.
Yeah, Tina just joined us, so Adam will get your question answered. I will show her that question.
Hi everyone, thanks for your patience dealing with a little attorney issues right now, working on a case, so I appreciate your patience. So the question in the chat is, when you say the list of agencies you work with, if we identify an adoption with a child in a different state through your own outreach, like your own networking outreach, will you still help with that? And yes, we would, and we've seen those cases, and I've worked with a couple of those cases where birth mom lives in that other state, but the birth mom might know of a friend that knows you guys as an adoptive family. And so we would match her with an agency to get counseling in that other state, and then still work with you guys on, you know, placement and finalization. But I believe the placement fee would still be with that other agency, and then we would work with you on post placement. So you're not double paying those fees, if that makes sense. I hope that answers your question.
Looks like Adam's typing to be clarified.
Yep, perfect. That I think answered their question.
His
So
question was about this shared.
oh, gotcha. Yep.
Good question.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Otherwise, I believe we're at the point of moving into our panels. I don't see any questions pop up, but at the end we'll take more questions. So if we want to start the panel, Casey and Katie, do you guys have a time limit that one of you needs to go first, or?
Hi, Casey and I chatted. I think I'm going to go first.
Okay.
Just working from home today, so I might get called away. So I thought maybe I'd go first just in case. So
Does that work for you, Casey? Okay.
Arlo might join me for our session when we chat if he wakes up. So
Sounds good. Well, I'll introduce Katie here. Katie and her husband Jason have adopted through American Adoptions for their first adoption, and then went through our agency for their second adoption. So they've seen both an out-of-state adoption and also adopting through our agency, and I think that is a really good perspective that Katie can talk about. So Katie, I'll let you take it away.
sounds good, and feel free to chime in if there's questions or anything at all as I'm talking. So like Tina said, my husband Jason and I, we've been married for about 9 years now. We always knew we wanted to be parents, and found out, you know, pretty quickly that that wasn't going to be able to happen for us biologically. And so once we found that out, we quickly decided we wanted to do adoption. I had actually worked as an adoption social worker for a period of time, so we had kind of had some of that background and knew what the process looked like. So it was an easy decision for us to start. But once we had made that decision, we were ready. I mean, we didn't want to wait, which I'm sure a lot of, you know, you families can identify with that, that once you make the decision to adopt, it's really hard to wait because you are excited and you are ready to go. And so for our first adoption, we did decide to do an out-of-state adoption just because I had known firsthand, being a social worker at Catholic Charities at the time, is that the wait was pretty long, you know, for in-state. So we decided to go ahead and work with American Adoptions. They are they work all over the United States. They're a very, very large agency. And I picked them because I had helped a couple of families during my time at Catholic Charities work with them, and they had a really high placement rate. And so we knew that was the route that we wanted to go. And so, you know, the process with them when we started, I guess I should say, we did a kind of teleconference with them for families that were interested in pursuing them. And this was back in 2014, mind you. So I think things have probably changed. But at the time, they had shared with us that 80% of their families are placed within 1 to 12 months. And they also had between 400 and 700 inquiries from birth parents every month. And those numbers really spoke loudly to my husband and I, and we thought, oh my gosh, like this is a, this is something that we're interested in. So we decided to sign on board with them. We still, of course, had our local agency. We worked with Catholic Charities at that time as our home study agency. And I will say, in complete honesty, that it was a little difficult to work with such a large agency. They do a lot of placements, which is great, but it's also really hard because I'm used to kind of that one-on-one connection, with the social workers and with the staff, and it was really hard to get that. But, having said that, I mean, we did have a successful placement with them, so I'm not going to say we ever regretted working with them. One of the biggest things with American Adoptions is that they spend a lot of time and energy on what they refer to as marketing. I don't know if I like that word, but they say marketing. They have a whole team that is specifically assigned to putting together your profile. They actually send you a video camera and a kit to do a video profile, which that was kind of fun. But this, I don't know if you can kind of see this, they just do a little kind of like few-page brochure, little profile book. And so that every family that's on their waiting list has a uniform look and for their profiles. At any given time, there's hundreds of families on their waiting list, and that was really intimidating to me because I would obsessively look at it every single day and see hundreds of families and think, how in the world are we going to get picked out of 100 other people or 200 other people? But they shared with me that they use like a database. So when they're working with birth parents, they talk about oh, hi, Arlo. They talk about different preferences and things that the birth parents are looking for, and then they kind of whittle it down to about 15 families to share with birth parents. We actually got our very first match after only 2 weeks of being on their waiting list. Of course, that was super exciting. It was a whirlwind of emotions. Unfortunately, that match fell through. Kind of like they were sharing earlier, I feel like one of the bigger risks with out-of-state adoptions, especially with American adoptions, we found that they really move really quickly. When a birth parent picks you, they match you right away. And I don't say this to scare you at all, but we had 3 failed matches with them before we were finally matched with our son's birth parents. So that was really difficult. I guess I don't know what's better, going months and months without hearing anything, or getting a match, getting your hopes up, and then having it fall through. It was really, really tough. But it's all in God's timing, and it did work out the way that it was supposed to. So I would say probably after about 7 or 8 months, we got matched with our son Harrison's birth parents. One of our biggest fears when we were doing this process is because American Adoptions is all over the country. We found ourselves really anxious about, oh my gosh, where are we going to have to go? Are we going to go to LA? Are we going to go to New York? Are we going to go to Texas? It was really scary just thinking you're going to have to go anywhere, anytime with little notice. But, part of it was exciting. We tried not to let the anxiety get the best of us, but that is kind of a risk when you use an agency like American Adoptions, just because it is anywhere in the country. We are very lucky. Our son Harrison was actually born in Ohio, and that's where my extended family lives. So God definitely had his hand in that because that really gave us a sense of peace and anxiety, and eased our anxiety. When we got the call for him, it was on a Wednesday, and he was actually born that prior Monday. So he was already born by the time we had gotten the call. So we quickly had to get in the car, drive 19 hours all the way to Ohio to meet our little boy. And it was so, so exciting. And so when I think about that moment, all of that stress and all of that anxiety along the way, all of the failed matches and everything that happened prior, You kind of forget about that because you're so happy about that end result. One of the challenging things with working with a bigger agency like them as well is that there isn't a whole lot of support, like boots on the ground support, I like to say. In the hospital, for example, there was a lot of, we were kind of doing things ourselves. My husband kept saying, that I was going into my social worker mode, because I had been there and I had done it before, but it's different when it's your own family. But the American Adoptions, they can't possibly have staff at every single hospital, at every single city. And so a lot of times they will call the hospital social worker, or they'll try to contract with an adoption agency in that area to try to see if their staff can support the hospital situation. So that was a little bit stressful. But it worked out, but that was a little stressful. As opposed to when, you're working with Christian Adoption Services, they have staff here that are supporting you, that are supporting the birth parents. That's certainly helpful. I feel like I'm kind of jumping all over the place. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to show you a picture. This is my family. I don't know if you can see. Can you see that? Maybe. So that's Harrison is 5.5 years old. So he's the one we adopted with American Adoptions. And then Rosie is our 2-year-old, and we adopted her when she was 14 months old through Christian Adoption Services. So we've had her at home with us now for about a year. But yeah, so both experiences very different, but both very special and very unique in their own way, of course. But, I would say with the out of state, a lot of the pros and cons that you talked about earlier really spoke to me. So out of state, it was great because it was quicker placement. I did appreciate that because we were struggling with the wait time. But, the biggest fears or downfalls were the cost, of course. I think that we ended up roughly $40,000 total. But again, that was, 6 years ago. So I imagine maybe fees have changed now, but that was a big fear, as well as not having that boots on the ground support in the hospital, were some of the biggest downfalls, I would say, as opposed to our placement with our little Rosie when she was local. It was a completely different experience. Again, I kind of feel like I went all over the place, and it's kind of hard to share stories. Does anyone have specific questions? I am so open to talking about anything that anyone might be wanting me to elaborate on. And if not, I'll stay on the line too. Casey and I are friends, and so we're familiar with each other's stories and have supported each other kind of along the way as well. So I'll stay on too while Casey shares her story, and then when she's finished, then hopefully we can help maybe answer any questions that you guys might have for us.
Okay, should I go ahead? Okay, I'm going to pull up the questions that Tina sent me to hopefully keep me on track here, and I'll do my best to, I think, kind of go through this outline of things to visit about that Tina sent fairly quickly, and then, like Katie did, leave some time for questions. This is, if I was at Target, I would never be like, oh, ask me anything, because I'll talk a little bit about like the privacy about our kids and everything in just a second, but this is a different situation where we're talking to prospective adoptive parents. And I know, like Katie said, we're more than willing to help. It's just at the end, I mean, if you have questions about anything, just ask. If it's something I don't want to answer, I just won't. But before I tell about our family, I just will say in the adoption process, when you are placed with a child, if you're on any groups online, they'll talk a lot about protecting your child's story, and I'm going to do everything I can to tell you as much as possible, but I also just want to say And I know you've done reading about this and everything with home study, or you will after placement. But I think the reason that people say that is just the way that it makes sense for me is I don't want my two sons. I have a son Fletcher and my son Arlo here. I don't want them to find out things about their health or their adoption story that everybody else already knows when they're learning their adoption story. I don't want a relative or something like that to, tell them something they didn't even know about themselves. That doesn't help with developing their own identity. So that's just a really important point I wanted to make as somebody who's totally willing to share. There are things that, we shouldn't share. And I just want to make that point in the beginning. So yeah, our family, I'll share a little picture here. I'm Casey Schultz. My first name Kacie, and then last name is Schulz. And I only say that because you guys can find me on, I'm more than willing to answer questions like after this as well. But I have a Schultz Scripted is kind of where I share bits and pieces of our adoption story on Instagram. And then I just started a Parler account too, and that's my first and last name. But you'll find your best friends in adoption are those who've been through it. And so I just encourage you, do connect with other people who have adopted or are in this process with you. Katie and I went to Concordia College at the same time, but like being adoptive moms and our other friends, like mutual friends that we know in adoption, just have been so invaluable, truly invaluable. You share things with them that you wouldn't even share with your own extended family. So about our story, Ryan and I have been married. We were married 7 years in August, and we didn't know, we actually still don't know. We have unexplained infertility, so I don't think that we will become pregnant, but we, I guess it's still possible, but we truly just, when things weren't happening, we were faced with, do you want to do infertility treatments or, just keep waiting or something else. And we prayed a lot about it, and God led us to adoption, and we are so grateful that our family has grown in this way. Our son Fletcher is just turned 3. He was born in Phoenix, and we worked with Building Arizona Families as the agency. And then our son Arlo turns 1 tomorrow, and we worked with Adoption Choices of Arizona when Arlo was placed with us. We did not know that we would receive a placement in Arizona. We worked with Christian Adoption Consultants. So we went the consulting route for the first time we adopted interstate. And we had a good experience with them, but what I learned and why we didn't work with a consultant the next time when we adopted Arlo is that a consultant really kind of disconnects you from the placing agency. And what I mean by that is we matched with, we actually had a match after waiting for about 4 months. Before we adopted Fletcher, we were matched, and then we were matched for two months, and then baby was delivered. We were in Arizona. It was disrupted. The match was disrupted, and we did not. We came home with a failed match. It's called, and then Fletcher was born 3 weeks later, and we went back to Arizona. So what I didn't realize, and Christian Adoption Consultants, who we paid to give us some guidance and do our profile book and get on these lists of receiving situations, what we didn't realize is that once you're matched, like we were matched with Building Arizona Families, once you're matched, the consultant is there for support on email, is what we learned in our experience, but you truly work with the caseworker here with Christian Adoption Services, and you work with the caseworker from the other agency, whether or not they're helping you and the expectant parents or just you. The consultant is, in our experience, not a huge part of that anymore. And I really believe that if you do interstate adoption, do interview any agencies that interview any out-of-state agencies that you're going to sign on their waiting list for. You want to know who they are. Like Katie said, American Adoptions has its positives and advantages, but it's kind of nice. I think if you try to establish a relationship with, like we did for the second time we adopted when we were placed with Arlo, just a year ago, I called agencies in the Phoenix area, because I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, but openness. I called agencies all over Phoenix. I just interviewed them, and I encourage you to do the same. The way they get back to you and return your calls as a prospective adoptive parent, and their communication and the resources they give you just to like apply and get on their list, that is going to be, I think, no, humble opinion here, but I think that's going to be indicative of, do you want to hold your brush? Indicative of how they'll work with you when you are matched. And there's nothing, I mean, this is such a complex and hard process, and I'm going to pray for all of you guys, because it's just difficult. But imagine being matched and maybe like not having all the communication that you would like when you do have a match. So if you're not hearing back before, you were putting everything, your family and your money on the line, everything to travel and maybe have this work out or not. If you're not hearing back like beforehand, it's even worse when you're matched and that's not happening. So just, I would encourage you do kind of establish a relationship with them. We didn't feel like we had that when we worked with a consultant. She made a beautiful profile book, and we really like her. It's just money that we thought could go towards the match, or the rest of the adoption process. And then it took me a lot longer than having her do it, but I ended up making our second profile book ourselves on Mixbook. And then the other reason I don't know that the reason we chose not to use a consultant again, and don't get me wrong, if you want to use a consultant, you're going to get value out of it. It's just for us, we wouldn't use them again. I have talked to so many adopted parents, and Christian Adoption Services, they don't pay me to say this, but they are so supportive. I mean, if you have questions, Tina was there to answer questions that, we were essentially paying a consultant to answer as well. So I know some places that you do a home study through, do your home study, and then it's like, well, contact us if you get a placement, and they're like out of the loop. Christian Adoption Services was with us kind of the whole process. So they do offer a lot of support, and that's really nice. So, but there are families that love working with CAC and FAC, and then I think there's a few other consultants. But the next thing I wanted to just mention that I think is in the questions from Tina was openness. We have a very open adoption with Fletcher. He's our 3-year-old. We have a very open adoption with his mom. We've been back to visit her in Arizona several times. I know this probably sounds crazy if you're not like in the situation, but we rented an Airbnb house, and we invited her to come spend the night where we rented this when we went back to visit one time. We talked to her almost every night on video messaging. So Fletcher tells her good night like every night. And it doesn't happen when our schedules don't align, but multiple times a week. And that is such a blessing. Biological parents are not always open to that. And that's their journey, but if I am a proponent of openness, if it works for you and if it works for the expectant parent, that if they end up placing. So I just cannot encourage that enough. We come from very different walks of life. Fletcher's biological mom and us. And I read a couple books that are not adoption related, but so inspiring about like just loving everybody and not, it can be scary, but like if you've never read Bob Goff, Love Does and Everybody Always, like those are just 2 books to read while you're waiting. They just encourage us to like step outside our comfort zone as believers and like love on everybody. And that I think that has helped keep our adoptions as open as they have been. which I wouldn't change for anything. I mean, we're as much invested in having that open relationship as she is. And then Arlo's mom and dad, and we call them mom and dad, we say Mama Angie and Mama or Daddy Russ. But we're hoping to visit them in the next couple of weeks here for the first time in person visit. But we also keep in touch with them really regularly too. So I really encourage openness. If you do follow my page that I have on Instagram, which I don't share everything on there, guys, and I really encourage you not to share everything on there. But if you what I do share on there, you will see like our level of openness. Last year, we got to celebrate Fletcher's second birthday in Arizona with his biological family. So, what am I missing? Hopefully, I'm not going way outside I'm not only talking about the process. Hopefully, I'm not giving you guys more than you're signing up for. Costs, gosh, you guys, I will tell you, I'm an investment advisor. I'm a certified financial planner. I know what Dave Ramsey says. I know what Robert Kiyosaki and Susie Orman say. Our adoptions were so expensive. You have to do what is right for your family. We leveraged ourselves. We took out an adoption loan for both of our adoptions, which is not what I would say, from a certified financial planning perspective. Like Dave Ramsey doesn't advocate having debt. I get it. But it's been like additional stress to us. Obviously, it's expensive. But we don't regret it. We don't regret taking out an adoption loan either time. And we, obviously you have to make sure that it's not too much stress for your family. You can pay your bills and everything. But here I am, certified financial planner, saying, we don't regret. There are so many options to finance an adoption, whether it's fundraising, I don't know. Again, you might think I'm crazy for saying this, but some people, there's downsides to this. I'm definitely not giving individual financial advice, but like 401k loans, TSP loans. My husband's a federal government employee. They have a TSP instead of a 401k. I know a lot of people who take home equity loans out, and I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying we didn't regret it. That's all I'm saying. Both of the adoptions, after all the expenses, traveling is cool, but it is very expensive. That's the downside of it. Also, we paid extra attorney fees because both of our sons have some Native American heritage. Both were like $60,000 after and not the kids. We didn't, the kids weren't that much. So all of the services cumulatively. And I say that because some people are, well, how much was your child? We didn't buy our child, how much were the cumulative services of everything doing interstate adoption twice? The first time having a failed match, like $60,000 both times. But that does include travel expenses and extra expenses when we're away from home. I think I'll stop there. Describe meeting birth parents. Just amazing. You just love everybody and be open-minded. Yeah, I'll just stop there and then feel free to ask any question that you have.
Thanks for sharing, Katie and Casey. We really appreciate it. And just hearing your personal experiences going through those experiences, I think is so helpful for others wanting to start the process. And I know both families have different experiences, so that's just good for them to hear all around what it looks like.
Was it too much, Tina?
No, it wasn't. No, it's your own experience. It's never too much. So thank you for sharing. Yeah. And openness, I do want to say openness doesn't look that open typically in out-of-state adoption. So that's such a blessing for your family. And that's kind of the downfall with out-of-state adoption sometimes is they don't have that much openness. They might not even have visits when you're talking in out-of-state adoption.
Yeah, I'll maybe speak to that. I mean, because our out-of-state adoption, the openness is very, very different to Casey's. When we were placed with our son. We had mentioned, that he was born a few days prior. And so she had already left the hospital by the time we got there. We were very open with the staff or with the adoption agency that we were open to meeting her or birth father, if they were open to it, and they had decided not to. So we initially went into the placement thinking that we were never going to have any contact with them. And that was really hard, because we really wanted to have this beautiful open relationship, like Casey had explained. But we shared our email address with the adoption agency, and we said, just if and when they're ready, just tell them that they can certainly reach out to us. And a short time after we actually returned back home from Ohio, we did hear from them. And so we have, it's certainly not as open as what Casey shared, but we email quite a bit, if there's any big event, like Harrison lost his first tooth a couple weeks ago, anything big, to document, we always send pictures and emails. Surprisingly enough, we really don't hear from his birth mom. We haven't heard from her in probably a year and a half, I would say, but we still send, I still send emails. I've got her email address, so I still send them. But we hear from his birth father a lot. And so we're just trying to hang on to as much contact as they're willing to give us, for as long as they're willing to give it. Because we want Harrison to know that it's important. It's been important for us, to keep that relationship open. We've offered visits, we said, we would love to do that. We've offered FaceTime, we've offered phone calls, but they just haven't felt ready, and that's okay. And we want to respect that. But, it is kind of challenging as an adoptive parent because, I hear Casey's story, I hear other friends, and they have some beautiful open relationships, and I just want that so bad. But it's hard, and you got to get there, and it's got to be something that you and the birth parents are comfortable with. And with Rosie, it's different too. We're working on kind of trying to build a relationship that we're both comfortable with, but everybody's story and situation is so different. So yeah, I just want to add that. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thanks for sharing, Katie. I appreciate it. At this time, we'll take questions in the chat if you have any questions for Casey and Katie, and then our moderator, Sue, can read those questions. So we'll just give people a moment to write them in. And I hope the guests attending, I hope you're finding this helpful too as you explore out-of-state adoptions and what that might look like for your family if you are interested.
I'll just add to, if you have questions and you're not comfortable, asking in front of the group or anything, maybe, Tina, I'd be more than willing to have you share my email address to the group, if anyone feels more comfortable emailing or, connecting that way or, connecting by phone. I'm more than happy to do that. And I see Casey nodding her head. I'm sure she's open to that as well. But we've been there, guys, and we know what you're going through. And I know we each have our own unique journey. But, we understand maybe in a little bit of a different way. So some of the best conversations I've had have been with other waiting parents or people who have been there before. So just to let you know we're here, and just feel free, if you're not comfortable asking here, always feel free to reach out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you can feel free to email those questions to me, and then I can pass those along to Katie and Casey. Okay. If there's no other questions, I think that's everything we have for you guys today. So we will, thanks everyone for your time and for your patience as we're working on some technical difficulties in the beginning. We do appreciate it, as this is our first time doing a live event, and so as an agency, so we appreciate all your patience. And so we will send this out as a recording afterwards to everyone. I know a lot of people couldn't attend because of work obligations, so I know a lot of people are really excited to receive the recording, so we'll send that out. And I do hope everyone is doing well and with life in this interesting time. And so I hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving coming up. And it was good to see you too, also Katie and Casey. So thank you so much for your time. today. So at the end, I will leave the meeting, and then feel free to email me questions as well. So thanks, everyone.